All right. Well, welcome everyone and good afternoon. My name is Erin Maney. I'm the manager of community engagement for Open SUNY. In partnership with SUNY OER Services, I'd like to welcome you to this Open Education Week Showcase webinar. On each of 4 days this week, presenters will be sharing what they're doing on their campuses around the theme of openness. So I hope that you will join us for as many sessions as you can to learn from each other and support your peers. Before I introduce our speaker today, I want to encourage you to leave us your name and email address as part of our efforts to recognize your engagement in today's webinar. I'm going to post a bit.ly link to a sign-in document, and you can take a moment and leave us your name and your email address. Also, let us know in the chat where you're tuning in from. I do see some SUNY partners there and probably some others, so it'd be interesting to see where you're from. All right, next slide, please. Great. Today we're pleased to host Joshua Zeiders-Weber from Jamestown Community College. Joshua is a professor of psychology and will be sharing findings from a fall 2017 basic comparative study between Carnegie Mellon University's Open Learning Initiative Psychology textbook and course and a Cengage psychology textbook and Mindtap program. Joshua, on behalf of the Open SUNY team, we thank you for joining us and for sharing what you know.
Yeah, thank you. I can get started then. OER, exclamation point. I did a comparative study last semester in the fall. I had the opportunity to do this because we just adopted as a department a new textbook from Cengage. And then I went to an OER conference and I said, oh, I want to try this too. So we decided to compare the two of them to see what we're going to do for the future of the department. So before I get started, I used the Carnegie Mellon University's OLI versus Cengage Mindtap. I just want to introduce you guys to what those look like a little bit. Let's see here. Oops. Quick. Is it too long? So this is Cengage's Mindtap program. And we're going to do... I actually really liked Cengage's online program. It's actually really cool. It's a gamified environment that's self-paced, adaptive learning content, all the new gadgetry you see with learning software. So I mean, in this respect, it was an excellent program. That's what sold it to us to begin with. The downfall of OLI, I think, just to be fair, is that it didn't have any of that adaptive learning content, so it didn't have the capacity to reach the learners that I think needed a little extra guidance. So, I mean, that aside, if we look a little bit further into it here, let's see here. There we go. OLI obviously is free, it costs $0. And in terms of setting up the study, I used two courses. Where's my, there. The first course for Cengage was at 10 a.m. The OLA course was at 11 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday for both of them. They were back to back. Both sections were given identical daily in-class reading quizzes. Both sections were awarded badges through Blackboard for completing milestones and certain marks on their assignments. I sent their reading assignments and online assignment due dates directly to their cell phones through Mind.com communication services, if you guys are familiar with that. They received the same exact lectures. They took the same exact exams. They were graded pretty much in the same way as their counterparts in the other class. In the OLI class, I had 28 students, and the outcome was a final grade class average about 70.48%, class test average 63.8%. Cengage's Mindtap cost $135. It was a custom edition. It usually costs more than that, but we worked with Cengage to bring the price down. I had 33 students and a final grade class average of 71.96 and a class test average of 65.2%. As we can see, there really wasn't much difference, at least on the surface of things, between the two. So if we take a look a little further, the attrition rates in both classes were really low. I think in the OLI course, I only had one total withdrawal, that is, they withdrew from the university or the actual college itself, and only one unexplained disappearance that wasn't a withdrawal. In the Cengage section, I had one total withdrawal, one course withdrawal, and one unexplained disappearance. So there wasn't really an issue, I think, with attrition from class in this case either. In terms of statistical findings, the OLI students in the high range, those who scored between 85 and 100%, scored consistently lower than the high range scorers using Mindtap. That means they were in that range, but they were on the lower end of that range. However, the OLI students in the low ranges scored consistently higher than those in low range scorers using, there's a typo there, using Cengage. What happened is I saw a lot of students falling more towards the center of the bell curve with OLI. I didn't get like the really epic wins, I guess you could say, on their exams. And I didn't see the epic failures either, so you didn't get those low 30s. Everybody was much more consistently grouped towards the center. And I think this has a lot to do with how the OLI was set up. And also the fact that it was readily available right from the beginning. They didn't get behind in anything. I saw fewer failures on exams with OLI, and the students were much more engaged with the optional content. With the Mindtap content, this isn't embedded in the text like OLI is. If we look at the OLI textbook, let's click on one here. Everything that they do is embedded in the text. All the questions, the activities, they don't have to go anywhere else. I find that students really like this. Most of my students, I'm going to go out there and say, are pretty menu driven in their lifestyles when they engage with technology. Everything with them is a click away. And I found that with Mindtap, it got really confusing for them for some reason. And I think having it just right in front of them, everything in the same place was a big sell for my students. They really seem to like the text overall. Let's see here. So some of the conclusions I think I came to after compiling the statistics, whatever, I think I came to in terms of talking with the students. And those conclusions were, it doesn't matter how amazing the high-tech the learning aids are if the student does not use them, because what I found instead is that Cengage, the Mindtap, seemed to leave behind the students who needed that extra boost the most, because there was this whole other sign up, there was this whole other place you had to go to outside the text. I found that the people who benefited most from Cengage were the ones who were already probably going to do well in the course anyways. So, if they're not going to use the expensive tech and the expensive textbook, then I don't really see a point in it in this case. And finally, there were, in this case, between the two classes, no differences between student learning outcomes that warrant a $135 price tag. And I think that's something we have to take into consideration, especially in my area. I'm from Jamestown, New York. And I'm not sure how familiar any of you are with the ALICE classification. ALICE is, means asset limited, income constrained, employed, or in poverty. 61% of the population of Jamestown, New York is classified as ALICE or in poverty. And what that means is those classified as ALICE are employed. They earn more than the US poverty level, but less than the basic cost of living for this county. Therefore, they can't afford the cost of basic needs like food, clothing, and shelter. I know that the majority of students at JCC do struggle financially here, and the majority of them are usually classified, whatever the given year is, at ALICE or below poverty level. They do struggle financially to support themselves, so a large percent, and percentage unable to even afford enough food daily. We've actually had to, some of my students, they work 40 plus hours a week and they still struggle to get by financially. We had to set up a campus food bank. We have a terrible public transportation system in Jamestown, so it makes it difficult for them to get to and from school oftentimes. So this plays a role in whether or not the student is going to be retained at school, and if they're going to excel or if they're going to struggle. And I think taking some of that financial burden off of them using OLI or any OER resources, something that should certainly be considered. As we see at number 2, $135 goes a long way for a student. We also know that they can't always afford their textbooks right off the bat. They're waiting for financial aid, that kind of thing. When it's free, they get to get right into the course. They don't get behind and have to struggle balancing it with the rest of their lives as well. The third reason that I have here that you should consider the switch to an OER, if you haven't already, is my students love free stuff. When I told them in my first class that I used this in, that their text was free, they were really super pumped about it. I actually had, I'm not even kidding, a student cry in class. And I said, "What are you crying for?" And she says, "I didn't think I was gonna be able to afford my textbook." I'm not even kidding, this happened. And, I felt really bad for her. Others were, pretty stoked about it. And they were happy that they didn't have to drop all of this money on an entry-level textbook that, they were going to use once and, never use again. So I think it comes down to number 4, that I think considering OER as being the right thing to do for students now as being pretty important. I mean, they struggle financially, especially in the area I'm at. You probably say that about your area as well. In fact, if you're interested in the ALICE reports, I can forward that to Erin, that site to Erin, and she can certainly pass that on. You can look up your specific county and look at the report for yourself. I think on principle alone, I can't bring myself to assign a text in an introductory course especially. I think in an upper level course, it can be warranted sometimes. And even if a textbook that you purchase is good, if it doesn't help everyone equally, as I think was the case with Cengage, then it's just another financial burden, and I don't think that's really fair to the students. So I think those are things that you should definitely consider. All right. I'll leave it with Erin now, if you'd like.
Great. Thank you, Joshua. Yeah, if you can give me the link to the site, we can also add it to the slides and to the website that lists all of our webinars this week.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I'll put that in as a supplemental resource. So the first question that I have in the chat for you is, was there any cost to you for using a textbook from Cengage?
Cost to me, no. I got my free text, that kind of thing. In fact, the department had made a deal to get kind of a kickback from Cengage for using their textbook as part of an ongoing research study that they were doing. So they were collecting information from us. I have no idea what information they decided to collect to us. My director would know that. But so yeah, I mean, it didn't cost me anything. If anything, using Cengage actually paid us to use it. So
that's interesting. And that is actually the only question so far. So anyone else who has a question, you can feel free to unmute your microphone and ask, or type in the chat. So I'll give a couple moments for that.
How does one open the chat? I don't know how to do that. Can I see that?
You have to stop sharing.
Oh, all right.
And that's fine. You can do that. And that's the drop down from the top.
Okay, there it is. So let's see here. How does one stop sharing? Oh wait, I see it. I see it. There we go. All right.
Great. And then next question, were students using a paper textbook from Cengage? Is this something maybe they could resell?
They were using a paper textbook, but it was a custom textbook for JCC only. We had chapters cut out to make it cheaper. So having them resell it that probably wouldn't work out for them unless they were selling it back to the bookstore here or another friend that was here at JCC, because it was specific to us.
Okay, and MJ is asking, can students continue to use the OLI materials after the course is over? That's a good point.
I believe that they can. I'd have to see. I'm not sure if their access stops when the course expires. You know, that's a good question. I should look into that. I know that they can get a hard copy of the textbook from OLI, I think for like $10 or $15. So if they wanted to get a copy to take with them, they actually could.
Yeah, that's good to know. I know sometimes, you know, when we use things in an LMS or in a contained system, then students can only use it for the duration of the course, right? So.
Yep. That's a good point. I didn't think about that. So I might have to check that out.
You probably didn't have anybody ask you, like a student requesting that. So, yeah.
I mean, I suppose I could set it for a date far in the future and it wouldn't be a problem, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hey Joshua, this is Alexis at SUNY OER Services. So glad you're able to join us today, and this is really helpful.
Good.
So just kind of speaking to some questions that we hear a lot from different faculty in our system, do you have any comments or observations about the difference of quality, or was there any observable difference in quality?
In terms of the actual textbook, the reading portion, there was zero difference in quality. I mean, it's an introductory textbook. You can look at 100 of them. I feel like I did the past year, and they're all, I mean, they're the same thing. They might be set up a little bit differently. In terms of the online component, I find that Mindtap's program was really cool, and I think if they actually took the time to use it, they would have excelled at it, but it wasn't embedded, so many of them just never took the time to use it. So, I mean, it's a payoff, I guess. It's not like the online stuff for OLI was bad. I mean, you had embedded videos, you had small little quizzes that you would take throughout the reading. So it was helpful, but it wasn't adaptive in any way. So it was just there.
Thank you. That's really useful.
Mm-hmm.
So Joshua, if you are doing this again, what will you use next time?
What do you mean, what will I use next time? Will I use...
Yeah, so MJ is asking the question, I'm assuming which materials?
Oh, which materials? I'm actually, once again, using OLI in all my Gen Ed courses, Gen Psych courses this semester. So I've actually changed over completely, and our director is actually considering the changeover for the department, maybe in the fall or the following spring. So.
Great. Other questions for Josh?
Hi, this is Doug Ham with Lakeshore Technical College in Wisconsin. I'm wondering other success factors for the students. For example, is it too early to tell, or do you see any retention benefits from this as far as semester to semester or completion via graduation, or is it still pretty early to look beyond individual grades for a semester?
I would say it's still pretty early. I'd probably have to wait at least another 2 semesters before I bother our statistics department over there, I suppose, for that information. I know that I do have a lot of, I teach most of my upper level courses in psychology in the spring. And I do have a lot of familiar faces, I think, from both classes. I mean, I'd have to look at the actual ratio to see if there's any difference, but I mean, they're still here, so.
That's a good sign. So thank you.
Josh, Matthew is asking, what would be an acceptable price point or conditions for use for the Cengage materials to win your business again?
It would be a hard sell for them, I think. In the end, I'm all about making sure all the students have their needs met. to better their education. And if Mindtaps was embedded in their online text, like actually in the textbook itself online, then I might consider it for $135 again, but it's just not.
Oh, great. And so Mike just posted a link to an article saying that you can continue access to OLI. It's an instructor setting.
Oh, all right. So I just have to.
That's awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Excellent. Thank you.
So I'll just mention that one of our own SUNY faculty members was a contributing author to the OLI Intro to Psych course, Amber Gillespie at Tompkins Portland Community College. And so I'll be sharing this with her too, because she loves to.
Please do.
Yeah, she loves to know how it's actually being used. And she teaches.
I like it, so it's good. I think the big thing for me, another big thing that we had with Cengage is, I think because of the complexity of the programming, there was always the danger and the reality that it would fail. There are a lot of technological frustrations, I think, for the students and even for me. At one point, when they were doing updates, it would clear my entire assignment calendar for the entire year, and I'd have to go back in and do it every time they updated it, or it would register them for the wrong course. Whereas with the OLI, it's so simplistic, so straightforward. I had zero technological issues with it, and I think that was a relief, not just for my students but for me as well, because I find myself in the past having to take care of those because tech support isn't always the it isn't always the quickest, I think. So.
Okay, well, in the interest of keeping to our time, I'll go ahead and post some wrap-up information and some links, but if anyone has continued questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll be here till 12:30, so I wanted to thank all of you that joined us today for doing so. Today's session was recorded, and it will be uploaded to the SUNY OER Services YouTube site by the end of the week, along with all of the other recordings. So I'll post that there in the chat for you. If you haven't had a chance to sign in, I would encourage you to do that too. It just helps us have a way to connect with you and give us your email address there. And while there are no SUNY hosted webinars tomorrow, I would invite you to check out the many exciting events on the Open Education Week website. They have all of their events listed there, and people are contributing resources throughout the week that are open and freely accessible. So that's a great site to have bookmarked as well. And our next Open Education Week webinar will be on Wednesday of this week, and that will feature Ken Podolak from SUNY Plattsburgh. Ken will be sharing about his journey developing an OpenStax physics textbook. That session will be Wednesday, March 7th, again at noon. Same link to join the session that you used today, and we'll be posting all of that information on our promotion page. So I'll put that in the chat for you. It has the access link there, the description, your presenters, and that will also be where we're going to put a link to the recording and any slides. So everything that you'll need will be in one place at that last link there. So again, thank you for joining us. Thank you to Joshua for sharing your experience and your candid interpretation of the materials. And we really appreciate that. We hope to see everyone at another Open Education event this week.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
And while I'm at it, I'll go ahead and plug. We have a live event too this week on Thursday at Corning Community College, which is open for anybody that's a SUNY member affiliated to attend. So if you're in the neighborhood of Corning and want to come by and see us, we'll be spending the full day there.
Terrific.